Hey Port Naz, happy Wednesday to you. Hope you're doing wonderful. Hope you're staying cool. It's pretty warm out there and going to be warm for a while. So stay in and stay hydrated and stay cool. Today, this beautiful Wednesday that the Lord has given us, we're going through Acts again. We're about 3/4 of the way through it. And this week, we're in Acts 21. Pastor Chad shared some with you yesterday. And today I'm going to continue that. We're going to be in 21 verses 27, and this is where Paul is arrested. And just yesterday, Chad shared with you about some things that Paul did to relate to some individuals and how he, in Jerusalem, loved on them by doing something that they asked him to do. And it was a purification they asked him to go through, and he did so. And so we pick up in verse 27, and it says, "When the 7 days were nearly over, some Jews from the province of Asia saw Paul at the temple. They stirred up the whole crowd and seized him, shouting, 'Men of Israel, help us! This is the man who teaches all men everywhere against our people and our law and this place. And besides, he has brought Greeks into the temple area and defiled this holy place.'" So here, in one breath, just a few moments ago, we hear about how Apostle Paul has even compromised in some area to relate to individuals, and now he's being persecuted for doing things, and it's being said that he's done something he hasn't even done. It says they had previously seen Trophimus, the Ephesian, in the city with Paul and assumed that Paul had taken him into the temple courts. So they're assuming that he had taken this Gentile into the temple courts, which would have been against the law. And so they were thrown into an uproar over this, and they start placing these false accusations. And so now we're having false persecution against Paul. It says right here, the whole city was aroused, and the people came running from all directions, seizing Paul. They dragged him from the temple, and immediately the gates were shut. While they were trying to kill him, news reached the commander of the Roman troops that the whole city of Jerusalem was in an uproar. Okay, so they're in the middle of trying to kill Paul. We don't know exactly what they're doing. We don't know if they're stoning him, beating him, giving him lashes. Poor Paul went through all of that, and so we don't know what it is. But what's happening here is the commander of the Roman troops, he's not concerned about Paul's life. That's not why he comes running. He's coming to restore peace. It says, he at once took some officers and soldiers and ran down to the crowd. So you can see the earnesty he has. When the rioters saw the commander and his soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. Okay, so here we read it was a beating he was going through. The commander came up and arrested him and ordered him to be bound with 2 chains. Then he asked who he was and what he had done. Some in the crowd shouted one thing and some another. I guess that's what happens when you come up with lies. You never get the story straight, right? And since the commander could not get at the truth because of the uproar, he ordered that Paul be taken into the barracks. When Paul reached the steps, the violence of the mob was so great he had to be carried by the soldiers. The crowd that followed kept shouting, "Away with him." Can you imagine what Paul was going through? Everything he had done since his vision of Christ and the way that Christ encountered him on the road to Damascus, Paul took his zeal, took his stubbornness, his grit that he had that drove him so strongly, and he used it for Christ and for God's glory. And he knew he was going to have to suffer due to the name of Christ, for he had been told that. But he stayed on track. His zeal kept him on track, going where he felt God and the Holy Spirit was leading him, even though persecution, imprisonment, and beatings, stonings, all of that awaited him, he stayed on track. I've never been persecuted like Paul has before, and I don't know if there's many of us who actually can say that we have, at least not in this country. But we will face our own persecution. It's not if, it's when. And when you face persecution, how are you going to handle it? Are you going to let the fear of what society says or the crowds as they're yelling against you, and it may not be necessarily like these crowds, but the voices of the world, the voices of the enemy that tries to put fear in your mind, Are you going to listen to that and let it throw you off course, or are you going to remember that you serve a great God who loves you dearly? And as he was with Paul through all of this, he's going to remain near and true to you. And it won't save you from the fire, but I think of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that and that song that's out there right now, that there was another in the fire. So as you're being persecuted, and at times you will be, remembering that there is another with you in this, walking this with you. And he may not save you from the persecution, but he will walk with you through it. And the Holy Spirit will guide you on how to handle it, what to do through it, if you will be quiet enough to let him speak to you through the loudness of this world and everything going on around us. So I just want to encourage you today, with whatever you're going through, whatever troubles, trials, temptations, persecutions, and those even to come, just remember that the same God who was with all of these that we read about in the Bible, who loves and is with them each step of the way, is still the God and Christ who lives within us and is with us now and will always walk with us through whatever we're going through. It's for him. It's for his glory, and he will make sure that that takes place. He doesn't need us to do this to give him a good name. He just needs our integrity, our honesty, and our ability to point to him so that others may see him also. So be encouraged by this today, knowing how much you are loved, and that in the middle of persecution or whatever comes your way, you're not alone. And if you stay on track, Christ will walk with you through all of it, every step of the way. You are loved, my friends.